What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another mailbag. This one is the first mailbag of the offseason, so we got a lot to discuss. We got coaching topics, we got trade topics, a lot of CJ stuff in this one, and we got some Norman Powell questions. We got a bunch of different questions, and I am going to answer them all. So this video might bounce around from topic to topic. I answer them in alphabetical order. So yeah, we're just going to go on this journey, see what you guys have for us, and we're going to answer some questions. That's the plan, as always, for the mailbag. Now, mock offseason team selection show will be on Monday the 14th over on our second channel, Blazers Uprise Live. All offseason, we are streaming Mondays and Thursdays on our second channel, going live around 9:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The link to that second channel is in the description box below. I tweeted out a stream schedule for that channel as well as some streams that we'll be doing here on the main channel this offseason. If you want that stream schedule, go to twitter.com, follow the channel's Twitter page at BlazersUpriseYT. It's one of the most recent tweets. I'll make sure that I pin it so it's easy for you all to find so you guys can stay up to date with our stream schedule. But mock offseason participants are about finalized at this point. For those of you that are participating, we will have a guide that'll go over some of the rules. If you want to follow along with our mock offseason, you can join our channel's Discord server. That link is also in the description box below. We will have a thread with trades that are made, as well as free agent signings and draft picks and all that stuff. So you can follow along live just by joining our Discord. It's getting pretty packed in there, so if you want to do it, click that link below. Without further ado, let's jump into your questions from the past week. The first question comes from Al-Farouk Aminu for 3. He says, would Mike D'Antoni be a good fit for the Trailblazers? I'm not a big fan of him. He seems very Stotts-ish. Doesn't seem like the type of guy that would really raise our defense. He's generally had good defensive assistants under him and a plethora of good defenders, so he's had good defensive units, but I don't think that's because of him as a coach. Offensively, his offenses in previous years, especially with James Harden, have seemed pretty stagnant. He is a more creative offensive coach than Terry Stotts is, but I don't want an offensive coach. I don't really want a Mike D'Antoni. I want a guy that can do it on both sides of the floor and be a little bit more creative on offense. And also, let me just say this. I think the dark questions were the way to go, especially considering how dark it tends to be in my room. Alec Horrell says, do you guys think Melo will resign on another vet minimum? I think there's a chance, but I wouldn't say it's high. Olshey, in his press conference the other day, said that they needed more impact defenders off the bench, not just scorers. So maybe he brings back one of Kanter and Melo. I would be shocked if both of them are back. I don't think that's the case. I think there's about a 50-50 chance that maybe one of Kanter and Melo are back. And if I had to guess, it would be Melo. I think Zach Collins will be the backup center going into next season. It's kind of hard to say at this point, though, what the bench will look like going into next year. Alex Wolf said, question, do you see Norm re-signing with Portland? Thanks. I think it's likelier than some people are acting like. I think there was 2 things that needed to happen to maximize the chances that Norman Powell came back. One was to fire Stotts. That happened. The second is to trade CJ, and there's a chance of that. If we trade CJ, then I think it's to clear way at the starting shooting guard spot for Norman Powell. I think we would trade CJ for like a Tobias Harris or a Chris Middleton. You know, a guy that could play the forward spot so that we could slot in Norm at the 2. I think Norm would rather play the 2 than the 3. But in the end, it's probably also going to come down to money. So how much do we offer him? Let me know in the comment section below how much you'd be comfortable with offering Norman Powell. Anton Montez says, would you like Giles to come back as a backup 5 and put Collins at the backup 4? If Giles would come back with a new coach, or is there another option that you like better? And I probably wouldn't want Giles to be the backup 5. I wouldn't want him to be in the rotation. I think we can do a little bit better than that. I would love him as a 3rd string center. Just say have Zach Collins as the backup center and then Giles as the 3rd string center. And then if Nurkic has some more injury issues or Collins has some more injury issues, and Giles could step in and be that backup center. I think under a better coach, Giles would look a lot better than he did under Stotts, and I just think he never really got the chance to fully get comfortable here in Portland. I just don't expect Giles to come back. He barely played. Even with Nurkic out, there was stretches where he couldn't see playing time. I don't think he enjoyed his year here. Maybe he enjoyed being a part of this organization, this locker room, but I think he wants to go somewhere where he knows he can play, and I don't think that spot will be Portland. Blazers Jr. says, if the Bucks get swept, what are the chances we get Giannis? Honestly, simply put, very unlikely. Extremely unlikely. I would love Giannis, but it's not something that I think is a realistic option going into this offseason. Brett Conway says, who do you and Eric want off the team? I can't speak for Eric, but I would say probably Enes Kanter. He was unplayable in the playoffs. Now, that was a tough matchup going against Jokic for some of his minutes, but I don't think Enes Kanter is the type of guy you want playing in the playoffs on a playoff team. I would like Kanter back as the third string center, if he wasn't a rotation piece. So if he was willing to do that, sure. It seems like he likes the organization and some of the guys here, but I would say Kanter. And then Melo, I'm kind of divided on. If we don't have any money, he's a pretty good option for a minimum contract. He's probably as good as you can get with a minimum contract, but still, I just want defensive players. I want to kind of get away from the isolation ball. That's why I want Stotts gone in the first place. So Melo, I wouldn't really care if he comes back either way. Eat a bowl of rice. What's up, man? He says, who are some role players / non-big name players the Blazers should target via trade or free agency to help out our depth this offseason? This is a great question. Nick Batum would be a good taxpayer mid-level exception target. We'll likely only have our taxpayer mid-level exception, so about $6 million to spend in free agency. Nick Batum would be pretty cool as a guy that can play 2 through 4, guard 2 through 4, be a bit of a playmaker. He shot the 3 ball well this year, can defend. He would be a guy that you could kind of slot in wherever and would make building out the bench really, really easy, and he could help Simons with some of the playmaking. He hasn't been much of a playmaker this year with the Clippers, but we know he has some playmaking ability at the forward spot, so he could kind of take that responsibility off of Simons, and if CJ's back, could help CJ out as well. Obviously, he's been a guy that's comfortable here. As far as other names, I haven't really gotten into that yet. I'm kind of just looking at the big CJ trades that are being thrown out there right now. So as far as some under-the-radar names, that's a really good question. Definitely ask that on a stream because I'm sure Eric will have some ideas. Or ask that in another mailbag as we get closer to the offseason because honestly, I was not prepared for this question. But Nick Batum, I think, would be a solid target. Embarking Box, another OG, he says, could you see our new coach putting Dame, Norm, Rocco Collins, and Nurkic in at the same time? How effective do you think that lineup could be? And it's hard to say if I could see our new coach putting that lineup in the game because I've yet to see our new coach. But I don't think a coach would be against playing that lineup. If Collins is shooting the 3 ball well, he can definitely play the 4. You just wouldn't want Collins to be struggling to shoot the ball and put him on the floor next to Nurkic unless Nurkic becomes a guy that can shoot the percentage he did this year on like 3 times the attempts. Because that's the thing. Nurkic was efficient from 3 this year. He just didn't shoot much of them. So he wasn't much of a floor spacer at that 5 spot. You just want 4 shooters on the floor at the same time. And I think you have enough shooting there. I mean, shoot, you might have 5 shooters in that lineup. I don't know. But it remains to be seen how mobile Collins is defending 4s once he comes back. Hopefully the ankle injury didn't create any long-term limitations on him. So I think a coach would be willing to throw that lineup out there on the court. Obviously, it will depend on what other pieces we have around that and so forth. Ethan Pettit says, question, you don't have to answer this. If we did trade Dame, what could we get in return? A Dame trade is very, very unlikely. This is just a hypothetical. And I'm just going to pull the Olshey. I'm not answering that question. I don't want to discuss Dame trades. Everybody's throwing out a Dame trade and, Dame for Kuzma. You hear that crap. You hear Dame for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Dame for Obi Toppin. I don't even want to discuss it. I'm tired of seeing Dame trades. So a very legitimate question for sure. I just would prefer not to answer it. I'd prefer to answer this one because this is a really good question. Ethan Pettit with another one. He says, what schemes or adjustments should the new coaching staff make to push us over the top, and what coach would best fit that? Phenomenal question. We need ball movement, creative offense that's hard to game plan for and shut down in the playoffs. We need creative defensive schemes, a coach that's willing to switch it up and also knows how to teach defense, so he's able to get his team executing no matter what they're running on the defensive end. And we need a coach that makes adjustments. I think Ime Udoka would be a really good under-the-radar target. He coached under Popovich for a long time, so Popovich obviously was the architect of that 2014 Spurs team, which just moved the ball phenomenally well. And Ime Udoka was always kind of a defensive guy. He'd command respect to the players, so he'd be a guy that would be a good coaching target. I can't promise that he'd be all those things and that he'd be a good coach. Obviously, it's just speculation when we talk to head coaching candidates, and that's why the Blazers need to go through the interview process to try and identify things with the head coach. They need to identify what their targets would do in certain situations. They just need to be thorough with it, and they need to figure it out, and they need to chase an ideology in terms of what they want their coach to be, and then they need to find the candidate that best fits that. I think Ime Udoka could be a good choice. I'm on board with Chauncey Billups as well. There's a few other guys that I would be cool with bringing in. Go Niners 05 says, I've seen some rumors that the Cavs have interest in CJ and Brandon Ingram, may be unhappy in New Orleans. What would a 3-team trade involving Sexton to New Orleans, CJ to his hometown team, and Ingram to Portland look like under CBA rules and adding first-round picks? Now, I'm not really sure how much cap space Cleveland has. Obviously, they're bringing in CJ, who makes a lot more than Colin Sexton at this point. So if they have cap space, they may be able to do that. Otherwise, the salary, I'm pretty sure, works for Portland and New Orleans. If the Cavs don't have cap space, then they'd obviously need to attach more salary in order to match CJ, since Sexton doesn't do it on his own. I don't see New Orleans wanting Sexton. I think they would want a guy that could play make, is kind of their star next to Zion. Because you want a guy that can run a two-man game with Zion, that is able to play off him, is able to distribute for him. You don't just want a scorer, which is all Colin Sexton is. He's a terrible passer for a point guard, and that's really what he is. He's 6'1". He's very undersized at the 2. So I don't think New Orleans would be too interested in him. I don't think they'd be interested in trading Sexton for CJ. CJ's much older and kind of the same type of player. Better playmaker and better scorer, but a lot older and has a lot bigger contract. Ingram would be a great return for us for CJ. Any sort of forward at that level would be a great return for CJ. I just don't think it's super likely. Isaac Sandstrom says, if the Lakers shake up their roster, are there any players you'd be interested in? Maybe Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, but I mean, we'd have to trade Derrick Jones Jr. and like Ellaby for him. I don't know. I am not a fan of a lot of guys on the Lakers roster. I'm not a fan of the role players. I said that going into Game 5, Game 6. Like, if AD wasn't able to go, they had no chance. And what happened? They had no chance. They lost. They got blown out. And that's because their role players have always been overrated. Schroeder, overrated pickup. I said that before this season. Turned out, he was an overrated pickup. I wouldn't be too interested in a Dennis Schroeder. I mean, who else they got? Harrell? I think he's going to be a free agent. I'm not a big fan of him either. He kind of has some Cantor-esque issues. He's a really bad pick-and-roll defender that struggles to play in the playoffs. And I'm not really interested in any of the role players. Jason Lee says, are we cleaning house with assistant coaches too, or is the team waiting for a new coach first? I think right now it's everything's in flux. I've heard that all the assistant coaches will be gone when you bring in a new coach. He wants to bring in his own assistant coaching staff. Now, the new coach might take a guy that was under Stotts' staff and say, I want him as one of my assistant coaches. So you might have a guy stay, but I don't think it's too likely. I think that when we get a new head coach, we're just going to have a completely new coaching staff. Jonah Herring says, Steve Clifford, Chauncey Billups, or other ideas of coaches to replace Stotts. As I've said, Ime Udoka and Chauncey Billups, I'm down for both of them. I would have liked Juwan Howard, but it sounds like he's going to stay at the University of Michigan. Mike Brown would be the most interesting kind of retread type of coach, but I haven't seen his name get tossed out there. Steve Clifford, I'm not a fan of. I'm not a fan of bringing in Steve Clifford to be the head coach of our team. I don't know much about him. It's just a retread like that hasn't really had success in the NBA. I'm not a huge fan of that unless I know that their ideologies are good. And I don't know that with Steve Clifford. I know that with Mike Brown. He told Dame before that Dame needs to be played off the ball more and they need better ball movement. And he's always been a very solid defensive coach. So that's two of the things that I want. As far as Steve Clifford, I don't know enough about him, and he hasn't been successful. He just doesn't stand out to me as a candidate that we should be interested in. Jordan Hutchison says, Mailbag, with the short list that has been released for coaching candidates, who would be your first choice and why? And who is one coach that wasn't on the list that you think could be a dark horse for the job? Ime Udoka, Chauncey Billups, Juwan Howard, Mike Brown. Etor Messina has been a guy that I like that hasn't been mentioned. I think he's back in Europe right now. He coached under Popovich for a while. He's a guy that I've always kind of liked as a potential head coach that hasn't been mentioned. I don't think he will come over and even be in the interview process, though. Other than that, I'm really kind of set on Ime Udoka, Chauncey Billups, Micah Brown, if we want to go the retread route. Juwan Howard would have been cool, but I think at this point, I want Chauncey Billups. He might go to Boston. If he goes to Boston, I want Ime Udoka. That's just the most simple way to put it. Cash Sneaker says, what do you guys think about the Blazers trading for Porzingis or K-Love? No, thank you. Neither of them are good defenders at the 4. Both of them are injury prone. Cal Wilson says, how can the NBA promote small markets in this era of player movement and empowerment? What incentives can be made to keep players in small markets or to get them to give a small market team the chance to acquire them in free agency? Should the NBA prohibit media members on TNT and ESPN from advocating for players to neglect their contracts and demand trades conveniently to media hubs like LA and New York? And this is a great question. You guys had great questions this week, and there's a lot to unpack with this one. I'm not entirely sure what the NBA can do in terms of controlling the way the media covers the game. ESPN has rights to NBA content, so they're allowed to talk about it. They're allowed to broadcast it. I mean, they do broadcast some games. It just could be a situation where when the NBA's new media contract comes up and ESPN is trying to, renegotiate it and keep the NBA on ESPN's platform for game broadcasting rights, it might be something where the NBA has to go to them and say, we don't like the way you guys cover the game on your morning shows with Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman and yada, yada, yada. And they might have to try and leverage a change in the way that ESPN covers the game. But as far as like FS1 goes with Skip Bayless, Shannon Sharp, I don't think the NBA has any control or influence or power to change the way the narrative is crafted from those guys. It has to be the fans that pay attention to what those guys say. Finally, just saying, you know what? I'm not going to keep buying this hot take garbage. I'm not going to keep caring what Skip Bayless says on Twitter. These guys literally just say stuff for attention. They say stuff for clicks. So they say outlandish stuff. Because what happens? Skip Bayless will hate on Dame on Twitter, and a bunch of Blazer fans will see that and be mad, and you'll have all this attention going Skip Bayless's way from Blazer fans freaking out about what Skip Bayless said about Damian Lillard. I have a ton of people come to me and say, did you see what Skip Bayless said? Did you see what Stephen A. Smith said? And I'm always just like, why do we care so much about what random people say? Those guys aren't basketball smart like some people think. They're literally paid to get attention, to get clicks, to make money. They're literally paid to talk well on camera. They're not paid to know basketball. They're not paid to know what the Utah Jazz are doing or who their 8th man is or that type of stuff. So I don't know why people buy into that so much. I think the biggest change that can happen is NBA fans finally being fed up with the way things are covered and them stopping paying attention to guys like that. As NBA fans, if you pay more attention to good coverage that isn't big market biased, that isn't that garbage that you see on FS1 and ESPN, then it's going to change the dynamic, because what's getting clicks, what's getting views, what's getting money isn't hot takes on shows like that. It's real legitimate analysis. So it's more so the NBA fan actually that is in control of that, in my opinion. But I don't have much hope in the average NBA fan. If you've seen NBA Twitter, you would probably agree with me. Leo says, if the Blazers decide to part ways with CJ and Nurk this offseason, who would you want in return? Middleton for CJ would be great. Tobias Harris for CJ would be good. I'm not really a fan of trading Nurkic. I don't think you could get a lot back for him, and I think he has a lot more value to us than he does to another team. So I'm interested in trading CJ. I've never really been one on the trade CJ for anything train. I'm still not on board that train, but I do see the logic in trading him for a forward. So Tobias Harris, Chris Middleton are my two ideal targets for CJ. If we could work out a 3-team trade and get back Siakam, that would be cool as well. As far as Nurkic goes, I want him back in the Blazers uniform next year. Lot Go Crazy says, should the Blazers ownership find a new GM? If Dame wants Olshey gone, you gotta get rid of him. If Dame doesn't really care, then I think this is kind of Olshey's last chance to make something happen this offseason. He's responsible for hiring the coach, so it's entirely on him what the coach does, essentially. I think this is his last chance. If he gets this offseason right, he could be here for many more years to come. If he doesn't get it right, I think he'll be gone next offseason. This offseason, though, I expect him to remain here unless Dame has a say otherwise. Shout out to MK saying, what all-star/borderline all-star do we have a realistic chance of getting? I'm thinking Siakam, Middleton, Tobias Harris. That is my top 3. Mike Posner asks, why would we keep CJ instead of trading him and resigning Norm to be our starting 2 next to Dame? The reason we would potentially keep CJ is we can't find a good trade for him. If we can't get any of those 3 guys I mentioned, the target list becomes very, very small. I'll see people toss out Karis LeVert and Jeremy Lamb and stuff like that, but Karis LeVert isn't a good defender and is a worse outside shooter, doesn't really solve any problems, so I don't really see the logic in that. I'll see a lot of trades of like CJ for Jeremy Grant, which is just unrealistic. I'll see CJ for Kevin Love and Porzingis, and I don't get that at all because both those guys don't defend any better than CJ at this point, and both those guys are extremely injury prone. So there's a lot of CJ stuff out there that doesn't make much sense to me. As I said, I'm not on board the trade CJ train as much as a lot of other people. We might decide to keep him, see what he looks like under a new coach, see how good our defense can be under a new coach, and then if it's still not working out at the trade deadline, you might have a better package for CJ that you could get back for trading him, and then you trade him at the deadline, and hopefully Norm is still on the team and you could slot him to the starting 2 then. Mohammed Abdullah says, want Kuzma package for Dame. Moneyballer99 says, do you realistically think we can get Karl-Anthony Towns this offseason? And if not, what is a realistic star you think we can get? I don't think it's super realistic that we get Karl-Anthony Towns. I've seen his name tossed out there, but he's not a good defender. So it's like, if we're making trades, aren't we supposed to be improving our defense? Wasn't that the problem the whole past year? I mean, it put a second star, a legitimate second star next to Dame. It's just Dame and Karl-Anthony Towns. Neither of them are good defenders. And it's kind of rough if your point guard and your center aren't good defenders, because that's the first line of your defense and that's the last line of your defense. I don't know. I'm not as high on a Karl-Anthony Towns trade this offseason as a lot of other Blazer fans are. I get it. You know, you're just trying to get talent. You're trying to get Dame, another star. But it'd take a ton of assets to get him. It takes CJ and Nurkic and Nas and Simons and a pick, maybe 2. I don't know how I feel about that. Mr. Sampson says, can we be content about keeping a 3-guard lineup and seeing how a new coach does? Or should we prioritize finding a move for CJ, even if it means a decline talent-wise? I think we can be content with a 3-guard lineup and seeing what it looks like under a new head coach. I think it should be better defensively than it was last year. Now, I don't want to keep the 3-guard lineup long-term. I think long-term trading CJ for the right package is the right move. Trading CJ for a decline in talent is not the right move. I am not on board with that. We need to add talent, not take away from it. Everybody says we don't have enough talent and then they want to trade CJ for a less talented player. We need more talent. I don't think this roster is perfect, even though I've been higher on it than most. I think we need to add talent, not decline it. So no to trading CJ for a decline in talent. I'm cool going into next season with the 3-guard lineup. Portland Maid says, Bismack, Biyombo, DeMarcus Cousins, Mike Muscala for the 3rd backup center. I know Muscala, he's not that good, just a different name to throw out there. And for a 3rd string center, I'm cool with any 3 of those guys. They're not guys that you would slot into the rotation. They would just be kind of an in case of emergency sort of 3rd string center. I mean, that's what 3rd stringers are for. So you would need a 3rd string center if you had Nurkic is the starting center and Collins is the backup center. Both those guys have dealt with a lot of injury problems. So DeMarcus Cousins would be the name I pick. Bismack Biyombo would be cool as well. I'd rather have both those guys over Muscala, but Muscala is a guy that can knock down some threes. So I'd be cool with any of those guys as the third string center. Yamcha says, is CJ McCollum really a factor of our problems when the Blazers have one of the best offenses? Not many playmakers like him play at this level. Good piece for other teams, but the problem was really the coaching the whole time. And I think the main problem was the coaching, and that's getting fixed. And that's why I'm cool with bringing CJ back. I'm kind of curious to see what a CJ Dame pairing looks like under a new head coach. I think that defensively our ceiling is a bit limited when you have CJ and Dame next to each other. Obviously, if you had a better defender than CJ, it would raise the ceiling of our defense. That's just common sense. So if you can pull off a trade of CJ for a similar offensive player that plays better defense, I think you have to do it, especially if they are a bigger player, you know, a Chris Middleton, and can play the small forward spot, and that makes positional things sort out better. Instead of running a 3-guard lineup, you're able to put Powell at the 2. He's more aptly sized for the shooting guard position than the small forward position. Chris Middleton is 6'7" with a 6'11" wingspan, if I recall correctly, so he can play the 3, and we wouldn't really be mismatched size-wise as much as we would be with a 3-guard lineup with Dame, CJ, and Norm. So I think you have to explore trade possibilities for him this offseason, but I don't think you have to trade him. And that wraps up this mailbag. This was a pretty long one, so shout out to you if you watched it all the way to the very end. If you want to, leave a like. It does help out the channel. And with that, I'm out of here. I'll catch you later. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Until next time, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.